What is up, guys? Rick Hackis here, and tomorrow, patch 2.4 is hitting Destiny, and with it is likely coming some big changes. There's going to be rebalancing and changes of mechanics, of classes, and of weapons. There was a little bit of confusion around this. Bungie was misquoted in saying that there won't be any weapon rebalancing with patch 2.4, but they've actually specifically gone to Reddit after this and said no, there will be changes to weapon balance. So that's what I wanted to talk about in today's video. Talk about this weapon rebalancing and specifically talk about what gun types and gun archetypes I think need a little bit of love. This is really going to talk about what you can likely expect from tomorrow's, changes from patch 2.4, because the stuff I'm talking about, I believe, is kind of universally known. The gun types, the archetypes we're going to talk about today are stuff that, just a little bit of time in the Crucible, you would see a total underrepresentation of what we're going over today. And if they aren't patched tomorrow, for goodness sakes, they should be patched at some future date. Because right now, I don't want to talk about nerfs. Firstly, because if you talk about nerfs, people have their very strong and usually very different opinions from yours about how to balance things, in PvE, in PvP. I definitely play more PvE because I enjoy it more, but I play a decent amount of PvP as well. But I really don't think right now that nerfs are necessary in terms of any huge things we need to stomp out. Yes, there can definitely be some tweaks, and I'm not saying that, stuff should be left exactly the same and nothing should get any sort of little nerfs. But what I'm saying is nothing really stands out to me in PvP or PvE as just incredibly overpowered that we need to stomp out. And again, everyone has their own opinion on this, and it makes sense. Judging by what you use and who you verse, you're going to have very different and legitimate opinions on what you believe is overpowered, underpowered, perfectly balanced, all of that stuff. But right now, we don't have like a Thorn last word Hawkmoon meta running wild where everyone is using these few guns. We have a reasonably diverse meta, and there's usually always counterplay. Yes, the universal remote is annoying as hell, but it's not, I can't say, overpowered and needs to be stomped down with a huge nerf. And that's really what I'm talking about. I would love Bungie to take maybe a different approach this time around. Again, it's going to be one day. Nothing I say in this video can change things for tomorrow, but hopefully they are taking kind of a different approach, and instead of just blanket nerfing entire gun types and the community being outraged, which unfortunately has happened before. Like, I'm not just saying this to be mean-spirited or to be negative. It has literally, that exact stuff has happened before in previous patches. But again, I hope that instead of doing that, they, show some of these gun archetypes that we're going to talk about today, just show them some love. Give the stuff that isn't being utilized because it's outclassed by other things a little bit of love. So without further ado, these are the things that I would firstly expect to see buffed in tomorrow's patch to hopefully increase their usage, and secondly, if not, hopefully these are the things that in the future we can get little tweaks to. Firstly, pulse rifles, but specifically the high damaging archetypes. Pulse rifles overall are seeing a lot of usage in the Crucible. The Hawksaw just is a force to be reckoned with in PvP, but the high damaging archetypes see very, very little usage. Stuff like the Nerwin's Mercy, which was once very, very good because it used to be able to kill lower armor enemies in 2 bursts if all your shots were headshots, now kill in 2 bursts at the absolute lowest possible armor builds. And even then, like, if you miss a single headshot, you're not getting that kill. So it's almost always a 3 burst kill with these type of pulse rifles, but so is the Hawksaw is a 3 burst kill. So why wouldn't you just use the 3 burst kill pulse rifle that has a much higher rate of fire? Like, it just makes sense that these have kind of fallen out of favor. I would love to see something that kind of increases their ability as long range primaries, perhaps increasing their range, perhaps increasing their damage a little bit so they can actually go back to being decent against low armor builds, and perhaps just an increase to their flinch potentially. If they're causing a lot of flinch, they might actually start to be utilized more as a long range primary option. And the same goes for the other more damaging archetype above them with the spare change archetype. These pulse rifles, the spare change, the messenger, the hopscotch pilgrim, that archetype of pulse rifles ruled the Crucible, in eons past it seems like, and now they barely see any play, mostly because really the only one that is in year 2 essentially that has infusion is the spare change. It has a ton of recoil. You have to get basically a perfect roll in order to actually use it effectively, but also just because these were toned back and nerfed from what they once were, and I would love to see a little bit of an increase come to them. Perhaps increase their lethality, bringing them back to kind of what they were in terms of killing potential and consistency, but then lowering their rate of fire even more, like lowering the time between the different bursts in order to extend that time to kill to make them a little bit more fair. Something needs to be done regardless, because they're just never see play in the Crucible. Speaking of stuff that almost never sees play and also needs a little bit of love, is the Haka pulse rifles. These pulse rifles are a little bit unique. They shoot in 4-round bursts, and they've never really had their time to shine in the Crucible. Every once in a while you see someone using one of these, but they really have just been completely overshadowed by the faster fire rate pulse rifles. I would love to see some sort of a buff come to them. Now, my idea for this would be an increase to damage, but only on body shot damage. These guns are very rough and tumble Haka unique pulse rifles. Let's keep them unique. These pulse rifles usually come with a lot of recoil. They're hard to land consistent headshots because it's 4-round bursts and they, jut upwards pretty quickly. Let's for once not focus on getting the most accurate pulse rifle roll you can and have a little bit of a more aggressively slanted rough and tumble pulse rifle that can reward you and have a consistent time to kill even if you're getting body shots. I would love to see something like that introduced, keeping these guns unique because they are very unique. They're the only pulse rifles that shoot in 4-round bursts, and just having something else, a different playstyle that can be utilized with a pulse rifle. Moving on, we have auto rifles. Now, the fast-firing auto rifles, like the Doctrine of Passage, do see a reasonable amount of play. Some people think they're overpowered, but using a primary with basically no range is limiting you quite a bit in the Crucible. These things are used because they are very, very consistent when you're getting only body shots. When you're that close range in a game like Destiny with that much mobility and everyone's jumping around and sliding around and shade stepping and all of that jazz, it's very hard to land all of your shots to the head. And that's why the Doctrine is so good, because it actually has a really consistent time to kill of 1 second, even if you get all body shots. Something like that, that consistency, that close range lethality should be applied to the other 2 archetypes, because the medium rate of fire archetype of auto rifles really doesn't see play too much. And especially the high damaging auto rifles almost never see play. And the simple reason being is because they're basically in a position that if you get all headshots, all like 8 shots to the head of an enemy, you're still just killing in like 0.95 seconds or something that is just average. So it's basically not a huge reward for doing something that is pretty hard, landing 8 headshots in a row in close range. Like, that is a difficult thing to ask. So making these more consistent, perhaps with some damage increasing, perhaps with some rate of fire increases, perhaps just with what they did kind of to the Doctrine, to some body shot damage increases to make them more consistent and to make them more close range friendly, that could really make auto rifles a little bit more of a force to be reckoned with, because right now you rarely see them in the Crucible, aside from, again, the Doctrine. Moving on, something that definitely needs some love is the medium rate of fire scout rifles. We have some very powerful scout rifles in the Crucible. The Meta Multitool is definitely one. The faster fire rate scout rifles, like the Suros DIS, they sometimes get used. I see them every once in a while. If you have like really good rolls, you definitely use those. The high damaging scout rifles, they actually have really fast time to kills if you land all of your headshots. Stuff like the Jade Rabbit sees a decent amount of play. But the medium rate of fire scout rifles, stuff like the Vision of Confluence, they kill like with all headshots in a second. So you are getting a pretty limited reward for landing all of your headshots. And to be quite honest, what is the point of using those scout rifles if they kill in 4 headshots when you can just use the faster Meta High Road Soldier archetype, which also kills in 4 headshots, but again, shoots faster, has a faster time to kill. Like, so something needs to be done. I would just add a lot more flinch. Like, they cause a ton more flinch for the medium rate of fire scout rifles. They need magazine size increases as well. They always have very low magazine sizes. Something needs to be done to just make them a little bit more usable, a little bit more user friendly, give people a reason to use this archetype of scout rifles over the other archetypes. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people saying hand cannons need a little bit of love, but to be quite honest, like, I'm making this judgment based on usage in the Crucible. When you play the Crucible, these are the things you don't often see. I'm not saying it's impossible to do well, like, with these guns. If you're amazing with your Nerwin's Mercy, congratulations. But most of the player base is steering away from these weapons because they've found that there's more competitive options. With hand cannons, you don't really have a shortage of hand cannons in the Crucible, and so judging based on usage, I can't say hand cannons need any sort of love to make them used more, because again, they're used quite a bit. I do think, however, you know, for the sake of argument, they could cause a little bit more flinch when you're hitting snipers. I'm just going to say that, but other than that, they do see some definite usage in PvP. Moving on though, I think sidearms. When's the last time you saw sidearms in PvP? Very rarely. It is sniper rifles, shotguns. And the reason being is because both of those gun types offer instant kills. If you have a sniper and you get a headshot, instant kill. If you have a shotgun, you're close enough, instant kill. That's huge. That's huge when we're talking about a game with relatively higher, like, time to kills. Stuff that kills instantaneously is very, very advantageous. So it's quite a lot for a gun type to be asking you to give up that instant kill potential with a special weapon and use a sidearm. Sidearms, I think, need to fulfill the role of being basically a backup primary. They should function as something that can actually do decent in medium ranges, even if you want to use a very unique primary, if you want to use, you know, the No Land Beyond, the Universal Remote. So I would love to see a range increase to sidearms, actually make them competitive and make them a viable option if you're running a unique, a slow shooting, a different primary. This can be your backup that can function in those middle ranges and can go toe to toe with other people using other primaries in those situations, rather than just kind of, they're regulated to a very close range, you know, engagements, but so are shotguns and fusion rifles, and those kill basically instantaneously. So it's kind of, you know, you guys can see the irony and perhaps see why they're not being used when sidearms are best within shotgun distance. And if you have really good rolls in your shotguns, you're going to be killing people instantly in the ranges that they're most effective with their sidearms. So I think the range of sidearms needs to be extended. Make them actually, people should have a reason. People should actually think, should I use a sidearm over my sniper, over my shotgun? And right now that choice is almost never being made. And speaking to that, actually, fusion rifles, really, you don't see them very often. They're kind of staging a semi-comeback. They are staging a little bit of a comeback. Definitely, you're seeing them more and more in PvP. But really, compared to snipers, compared to shotguns, it's like extremely low, almost single-digit usage numbers, maybe barely double-digit usage numbers compared to what we have in shotguns and in sniper rifles. And so I think they need a tiny bit of a buff. And I would say something like across the board, like 7-10% faster charge times. This is actually pretty small. If you have a fusion rifle and it has a charge time now 7% faster, that means 93% of it is exactly the same. It's not going to be a massive change. It's going to be hardly noticeable, but it's just going to make them a little bit more competitive. But mostly a change like this would just make people try them. Like if you say, hey, fusion rifles are getting a blanket buff for charge time, even if that charge time is, again, isn't really increased. This is a small amount we're talking about. Definitely not going to warp the meta. Still going to be plenty of sniper rifles and shotguns, so don't think it's going to change that. But if they get a blanket buff like that, people are going to, you know, dust off their fusion rifles, take them into the Crucible, and, you know, start to like them, use them more, realize, hey, this is actually a really good weapon. Because right now, there's really no reason, people don't have a huge incentive to switch off of their god roll snipers and god roll shotguns. Buffing fusion rifles, even if it's just by a little bit, would be that incentive to make people go try out fusion rifles, and hopefully we can get some more fusion rifle usage and actually get a little bit of diversity when it comes to the secondary weapon slot. And so, those are the things I would love to see get buffs in tomorrow's patch, in patch 2.4. Guys, I'm not claiming I absolutely know everything, in Destiny. If you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. Leave in the comment section what you would do to make the lesser utilized weapons actually see some gameplay, because that's my goal. I play PvP, I'm sure most of you guys play PvP, and when you do, you see clearly there's archetypes, the ones we went over today especially, that just don't see a lot of usage. You see, the small number of archetypes, a small number of guns utilized over and over and over again. When you have a loot-based game, one of the key factors in making it a success is diversity. Give people the option to use what they want to use. Give people a reason to use that god roll auto rifle, the high damaging auto rifle that they've gone off and worked hard to actually get, that they've gotten lucky and gotten an amazing roll. It sucks that, you have these weapons like that just aren't good, and it's not anyone's fault, it's just they're not good in the current meta. And so I would love to see a little bit more diversity brought to PvP, and I think that we can achieve that through, instead of nerfing, giving, again, just a little bit of love to the gun types that need it. So that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you want to see more Destiny content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. That's going to be linked in the description down below at @RickHackus, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day. The purpose of this guide is to best ease your transition into the new Rise of Iron expansion, and to get you ready as quickly as possible for the new Wrath of the Machine raid coming out September 23rd.